Well, hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me and being a part of our study here as we conclude our series on the Battle Buddy. We have gone through these last 16 weeks together, these 16 episodes discussing the Battle Buddy, our series on the Armor Bearer. And so I'm bringing this final one to you a little bit much more freer than the others. I really enjoyed putting that study together and presenting it in a really fun, at least study way. That excuse me. I hope that you got a lot out of it, and really rewarding. Today, I wanted to just kind of bring a lot more of a laid back approach, and by that I mean no notes, and primarily it's because I want to take a much more personal and practical approach to the episode today. Um, in the last 15 videos, I wrote out my notes, I did study, I looked at it, and went through it, and but I wanted to take one final finale as I come on this last episode, and to really again come with that personal yet practical way in this video. And so I wanted to share a little bit more about my story of my perspective as I've come through the journey of being a battle buddy myself and going through my journey of being an armor bearer, um, and kind of share a little bit about my testimony. I will do my best to give the facts and the details best I can. I will try to avoid saying names for a couple reasons. One, I want to respect everyone else's privacy, but at the same time, I don't want to leave anybody else out. And but I do. I want to kind of share this a little bit more and be a lot more transparent, so you can kind of see that when I've been going through the Battle Buddy series, the Armor Bearer series, it it was more than just me just trying to share, do a Bible study, but it was more of just that developing a heart that I've tried to develop within myself. And then not only have I tried to develop that within myself, but also how can I develop it in my own team? And so that's where I kind of find ourselves right now. And so it was really fun to go through that, is reminiscing a lot about my stories, and thinking about my life and testimony and the different churches that I've been involved in. And so I did. I kind of kept all of that to myself until here at the very end, because I wanted to just take a moment and just kind of share that in a very simplified way. Excuse me. And so I get to do that for you all today. So thank you for joining in on this here at as we come together on Albert Lee Assembly of God, our series on the Battle Buddy. So I began my ministry journey in a small town in Western Washington, small town of Falls City, at our church there at Valley Christian Assembly. Its name has changed since then, but to me, because I grew up there and I remember it, it's always going to be VCA. And I started out there right after graduating high school. I would aside from helping out in the youth group and being a youth leader, once I graduated high school, I kind of took a year, and then I decided to go for an internship. And so I did a ministry internship at that church. And looking back, was I the best intern? Probably not. I knew very little. All I knew is that I wanted to work in the church and do whatever it was that the church needed done. Um, which really it meant being that extra pair of hands for whatever job was needed. Um, and so I learned very quickly of what it takes with smaller churches to really come alongside and to minister in those environments, and being that extra set of hands. And it was a lot of fun, working on making props for the youth ministry, or helping the senior pastor with his research, um, and writing a few things up, to cleaning after vandalism. Just a lot of great experiences, and then getting coffee with the staff, or going and ministering to teenagers, and it really was that internship was whatever the church needs. And so that is really how my ministry journey began. It started as someone who loved the Lord and loved the local church, and was willing and wanting, honestly wanting to do whatever the church needed done. And so it was really exciting to be in that place. We had a lot of fun. There were some jokes, and there were some boring days, but then there were days that were really exciting and lots of fun. And it varied moment by moment. And so that's where it started. It started in that place, and from there I went into Bible college after that internship, and really began just studying the Word, and getting a deeper understanding of it, and allowing it to really impact my life and to really transform me. And that was a wonderful experience there at Bible college, and learning again, having that same heart of whatever does the church need. I'll do whatever it needs as much as I have the physical means and ability to do it. Hey, you point me in a direction, and I'm going to go off in that. And that was really my start, and that's where the basis of being on staff, not being in the lead chair, but just basically coming into a church and willing to do anything. Helping out in the nursery, teaching a Sunday school class. It really was, what does the church need? Put me in there. And that willingness to do whatever it was, whether it was vacuuming a room or cleaning a toilet, that was my desire. Where I would even stay up late decorating for VBS, or organizing a whole division of a missions trip. Um, it, it did a lot, and that was probably one of the fun things I did right there at the tail end before I moved away. Was helping to organize the whole uh, community service programs for an entire week of a missions trip for our teens. And that was just a really exciting starting point for me. Um, from there, I would go to Bible college. I would end up, I met my wife, and we would get married, and we would move all the way across the country. So I went from Western Washington all the way to Eastern Tennessee, and I arrived there in Eastern Tennessee, and again, my heart is, I know that I'm called to be a pastor. I know what God's desire for me is, but at the same time, my heartbeat is, what does the church need? What does any church need? And um, just being willing to get into those places and to make those things happen. Um, and so it was a wonderful experience. Now we arrive in Tennessee, and within a couple weeks of arriving at Tennessee, we found ourselves in a church that had a substantial need. Um, Ottawa in Ottawa, Tennessee, um, there was this little Church of God right there in Ottawa, and they needed a children's and youth director, and so we got connected into that church, and they were excited about us, we were excited about them, and so they plugged us right in, and we became their youth leaders and their children's leaders. And so my wife and I, we entered into that church. The children's program maybe had anywhere from 1 to 4 or even 5 on a great day. um, and the youth group started with 2 or 3, and we just, our goal was not necessarily to grow the groups. Our goal was to make disciples, and from that, the group did grow, and wonderful things did happen, and our goal was, what can we do to help this church get a thriving youth program? What can we do to this church to really get these people excited about their kids and their teenagers. And so we did, and we pulled out all the stops, and we did a ton. um, we had a wonderful sets of parents behind us, and they were so encouraged by what we did to pour into their kids. And it was a wonderful season of just learning what it took to minister. Um, I learned in those days how to really get more comfortable preaching these little sermonettes or these little devotionals that I prepared that were, um, looking back, I am, as an experienced preacher now, I'm looking back at those and I'm embarrassed by a few of them, but it was my willing heart that just wanted to see these teens grow and willing to reach them. And that it became again that heart's desire of what does that group need continued to drive me. um we had teens that wanted to come to Wednesday night, but they had no transportation, they had no way to get there, and they really wanted to come. And so we made the call to use the church van to pick them up. And so we were picking up students on Sundays and Wednesdays, twice a week, picking them up in the van, filling the van, and coming back to the church, going through the service. And then as soon as the service was over, we would take them back home. And that was our normal. That's how we did. And there were some people in the church there that they were behind us, and they were enthusiastic and so excited that we were sacrificially going and getting these teenagers and bringing them in, bringing these children in from miles away. I mean, we were driving half an hour to go and get kids, and then drive another half hour to bring them back to the church. And um, and we did. I mean, we were fully invested in this. And but then there was also other people in the church who were not happy that we were doing this, and they were very upset, um, to the point where it was, very, very difficult for us to be in the same room with them, because they were always angry at us for using the van to go get kids, or the fact that we were moving things around, to make room for these kids. And that was a really difficult season that we dealt with in there. And um, that was probably the first church that I had ever experienced in my life, where on the one hand you had those who were willing to do whatever it takes to reach people and to minister, do whatever it takes for the church. But then you had, on the other hand, you had those who were uh, just completely opposed to reaching even the easiest of opportunities. They did not want us reaching the kids. They didn't want us driving out to go pick them up, and it was quite difficult to do that. And that's where I realized that there are going to be some people who just don't want to do whatever it takes to reach people. And so that was really hard. That was really hard. I think we had all these big dreams and these big ideas, these things that we wanted to do, we wanted to see happen, and we were so passionate and excited about bringing these things in, and we were just waiting for someone just to keep saying go, go, go. And we wanted to do more, and we wanted to achieve more. And but there was that up again, that level of opposition was so loud. It wasn't even very big, it was just loud. And but it was one that really just took the wind out of our sails, and um, made it very difficult. But again, our heart's desire was still to move and to meet the needs of the church. um, and so it was wonderful, and we were there for a little over 4 years. About 4 years we were there, and we saw the our firstborn came to us in that church. And they still love him to this day. And it is just a wonderful experience. And so we were able to impact those kids. And even though there was opposition in those, just our heart's desire to do whatever we could for these teenagers. I mean, we took them to conferences, we took them on retreats, we did a lot of things to reach these young people, and it made a huge impact with them. We passed on a desire for reading. We passed on a desire for the word, and it transformed many of their lives. And what's really fun too, in regards to all this as well, is that with social media, it's really fun because I get to follow up with these former students of mine, and I get to see the wonderful things that they're doing with their lives and the journeys that they've been on. And it is really exciting to see what fruit we got to be a part of in that in their journey. And so it was very exciting, and we're very thankful for that opportunity again. And it was our whole purpose there was, here's a church that um, and wanted a invigorating youth ministry, and they wanted to um, have an inspiration for the youth and the kids, and we were able to bring some really strong discipleship into that. And so it was wonderful what came out of that. And I look back at that with the hard and the good, and I look back at it with such joy, because again, it's part of my story and what the Lord has really taught us. Um, when that church, the opposition grew, and we felt led of the Holy Spirit that it was time to end our season there. And that's really when we saw a lot of fun, where people were really touched by our ministry. When we were on our way out the door from that church, was when we really saw the impact that we did, and how many people were really excited about what we have done, and very thankful for our time there. And so it was really rewarding, in being a part of that. And so it was good. We turned in our time there, and we went on to our next assignment, and we went on to become the youth pastors. About the same time I got my ministry credentials, I we became youth pastors at an Assemblies of God church in Hickson. At the time, again, churches changing their names. At the time, the church was called Bethel Temple, and it was a wonderful church. Great potential, a lot of fun there. And again, um, my heart's desire was to just serve. My heart's desire again was to meet the needs of the people, meet the needs of the church, and to really just disciple and bring people into that just really great understanding of the Lord. And so it was a really exciting season, being there. And at the first church there in Udawa, my office was the Sunday school classroom, and my car. And I just, there was nothing to have to worry about. And I come into this new church in Hickson, and I get an office, I get a desk, I get this opportunity to work there. And so I'm working part-time, I'm working other jobs, um, trying my best to balance all those huge responsibilities, at the same time still be a parent. And it was a great learning season. I learned a lot. The first church wasn't very busy. Everything that was busy was stuff that my wife and I did on our own time. And we go from that church to this other one that had, like, 4 days out of the week something was going on. And it was a very, very busy, very, very moving church. And it was really fun. Part of the requirements of being on staff meant that I had to be at nearly as many of those events as possible, and so that got really exhausting really fast, because again, that being at every single thing and having to be involved at every area, at the same time trying to raise my kid and work another job and do all the ministry that the church required, it was really um adding up. And but again, my heart's desire was what is needed, what can I do? And I began to really learn at that church, um, really just the scope of, um, one, how busy ministry really can be, but I also learned, um, a really, not just how busy, but how much excellence things needed. And I began to see just a lot more of what ministry takes. And um, in this my other job, I began to have to make a decision, and this is where this decision was a big one, because for me, if I'm called to be a pastor, if the Lord has moved upon me to be the lead minister, then I need to make sure that I am moving in that direction. And part of that meant making huge sacrifices and saying no to what otherwise could be really amazing jobs. And so I did. I had to make those adjustments and say no to really nice jobs that would have taken care of our family. But it would, by saying no, I was able to affirm other ministry opportunities, and it was really amazing. I learned a lot about what it takes for fundraising. I learned what it takes to lead different groups and to really just make an impact on students' lives. And it was a lot of fun. Um, and in that church, we went through a lot, and we came to a particular season in that church about almost 3 years in. uh, we I kind of things began to sour there, and um, a lot of it was I was not meeting the ideal requirements that the lead pastor had. And so I get called into his office one evening after youth, and they decide to let me go immediately. And that was a very hard season, um, going through that, because I thought I was doing okay, and that's where I began to realize, um, where lead pastors can have one agenda and one perspective on things that is different from someone on staff. And I had to learn really quickly right there, where I was at. And that was really hard, going through that season of being let go from a church. And I know that other ministers will have harder stories, much more difficult and devastating stories, but this one was mine. And I was still really young. Um, my daughter had been born, um, like she was just months old, and my oldest at the time was, he was 4. He had not even turned 5 yet, and we were in this season, and yeah, it was something else. Well, he was 3. I think Elijah was 3. And so we found ourselves in this amazing season and difficulty, because I thought I was doing everything right. I mean, I was in some schools. I was in 2 different schools, but I was not in the one school that the pastor wanted me to. And part of that had to do with just the school's requirement and my own capabilities. Um, and so there was some requirements that he had that I had failed to meet. And and so I learned really quickly that even though I I saw my heart was to meet needs of the church, that I needed to do more than that. And so I began to realize that there was something more I had to do. I realized I was still called to do ministry. I know that I was still supposed to do something. So after a couple weeks of just beating myself up, um, we decided to begin looking for other ministry opportunities. And again, my heart was still to meet the needs of the church, to come alongside and just do something more. But at the same time, a realization began to hit me, and I didn't know exactly in this season. Looking back, I know now what it was, but in that moment, I didn't. But I knew there was something stirring in there. we ended up finding this amazing church that was looking for a a youth pastor and a wife, a youth pastor and wife team, and which just sat so well with my wife and I. And so we applied, and over Father's Day weekend they had invited us out, and we got to know the church. They got to interview us. We They got to review all of my resumes and all the stuff that I put out there. And over Father's Day weekend they made the choice to bring us on as their new youth pastors, and that was a an amazing season. It's to me it is such an exciting season to look back upon. Was I in my mind, was I perfect? I was far from it. I had a lot of stuff that I had to work through, that I had to learn about. And so I did. I had to process still a ton of things. But I learned in that season that my desire to meet the needs of the church, and uh, going over what happened previously in Hickson, um, I began to learn more. And what I began to realize at this new church in Texas, in small little town of Evadale, Texas, what really began to take root in my mind was more than just meeting the needs of the church and ministering to meet the needs of the people, but specifically, how can I be a resource for the senior pastor? And so that's when I began to realize that ministry on staff, ministry within the church, is more than just meeting the needs that I saw in the church, or meeting the needs that I knew of in the community, but rather it was about meeting the needs of the senior pastor. And that's why I say I was not perfect, because I there was still some lost in translation moments that occurred where I did not meet his expectations on certain things, and he had to communicate those to me. And I praise God that he did it in a gracious way. That the lead pastor there did a fantastic job of showing me and encouraging me the areas where I needed to improve. And I did. I wanted to please him. I wanted um, to meet these needs that he had, and to come alongside him and to support his ministry. And that was my desire. You know, there was still some moments where I was still learning. I was still an individual, and I would do my thing, and it was not what he wanted. And and again, he would communicate those to me, and so I did. I really wanted to make sure that um, that whatever he needed done, I was there. And that's really funny. And one of the things that he really did a great job in communicating this to me is in the job requirements on the job posting, on the very bottom, one of the last lines, it says, and to meet whatever other needs the pastor expresses. And I love that, because it is so key that the Lord has called that lead pastor to lead that church, to be that ministry leader, and to lead that people, to strengthen, to teach them the word, to to do the work in that church. And that's what he was called to do. He is the lead discipler, he's the lead pastor, he is the lead shepherd of that local assembly, and that God placed him in that role for a purpose. He didn't place the staff pastor there. He didn't place me in that position. He brought me in to come in underneath and upgird that senior pastor. I came in, and my original position in that church was to be the best armor bearer that I could be in that church. And it wasn't easy, because again, we can become so filled with ambition that we plan or think higher than we ought to, and we can put ourselves in these places that we have no right being. You know, my job was to come alongside him and not to usurp him, not to make him do certain things, or not to um, force my will above his. My job was to say, hey, if he came up to me and said, hey, Rhino, I want you to go and do X, Y, and Z. I want you to go and to take care of the grass there. I want you to go and trim that bush. I want you to go and take the trash out. I want you to. Then my job was to be willingly say, yes, sir, and to get it done. As if I'm ministering to the Lord, because guess what? God had put me in that church underneath this man and his family to help them do their job well. And that's where I began to recognize two things. I began to recognize that my job was not to be the leader. My job was to come alongside the leader and to handle the areas that he gave me to handle and to do it in such a way that was excellent and praiseworthy. Now, was that always the case? Did I always excel in that? No, I didn't. I made many mistakes. But at the same time, my aim and my goal was to meet those areas, to meet those needs that he had, and to make his job easier. Because if his job was easier, then he could lead better. He could lead with greater purpose, and then trusting that the other areas of ministry that he had delegated to me were being handled appropriately. And that's where I began to realize that many times what a church needs isn't necessarily what we see the church needs, but rather it's what is the needs of the senior pastor? What are the needs of the one who is overseeing that whole church? And some of those needs they have, we might see, people working in the nursery, or Sunday school teachers, um, or youth pastors. We might see that initial need and recognize that is a huge need that the pastor has, as well as the church. But then there's sometimes there might be needs that we don't see or we don't recognize, and we don't know. But if I can go to the lead pastor and we can communicate with that, he can share with me his needs. And sometimes his needs are the lead pastor's needs are not necessarily an open position. Sometimes it's the person in a position that needs to do something appropriately. And that was a huge thing for me, that looking back at the previous church there in Hickson, there were needs that the senior pastor had. Whether they were communicated to me or not, I don't remember. Um, some of them might have been. Some of them might have been communicated to me too lately. I just didn't see them. And because he had needs that I was failing to meet, that's why he had to let me go. Versus me recognizing and having that communication and that heart willing to meet the needs, and seeing that the pastor has needs that are bigger than mine, and what can I do to serve them. And that's where I really learned a whole lot. And then in that same church, I knew that the Lord had called us to be senior pastors, and I've known that my whole life. I knew that I was supposed to be a senior pastor in a church and to be that lead minister, and that's where I have worked on myself and my own giftings. And again, part of that role of being an armor bearer is submitting yourself to your leadership. And so I had prayed. I said, Lord, I'm an armor bearer to this minister. I'm trying to do the best I can. I know it's not always perfect. Um, but Lord, when it is time for me, with my maturity and my skill set, when your timing for me is right, and it's time for me to step up and to become a senior pastor, what I need is for this man to acknowledge it. And so I asked, I prayed. We had prayed. My wife and I had prayed. And we had asked the Lord. We said, Lord, when it is time for us to step up into the next thing, like, we did not want to leave that church. We were loving every minute of serving alongside them, but we also knew that God was stirring in us for something more. And but we wanted to make sure that we were still armor bearers, that we were still underneath another pastor. And so we decided, we said, Lord, when it is time for us, we want this man and his family to tell us that it's time. We want them to tell us that we are spinning our wheels doing youth ministry, that it is time for us to become senior pastors, and that we're just wasting our time, and it's time for us to we've matured and we've grown, and it's time for us that to happen. And sure enough, within a year later, the Lord moved, and my pastor, we were driving, and he looks at me and he says the exact words, nearly word for word, that I had prayed months earlier that the Lord would use to tell me it's time to step up. And he gave me those words, and and I waited a week before I told him what that meant. And it was, again, it's just me. Just, what does my pastor need? What does the church need? And that desire to fill that. And then the Lord moved, and I became the lead pastor 5 years ago, over 5 years ago, here at Albert Lee Assembly of God Church here in Minnesota, and it has been a fantastic journey. And so all of those stories, and this is the the several minute version of that, and however long this video is, and I say all that so that you understand my story and where I come from when I talk about the battle buddy, when I talk about the armor bearer, that I was never perfect in it. I tried really hard. And I think as I matured and I went to different churches, I was able to take those skill sets to the next church. And so now here I am as a lead pastor in this church, and I recognize the importance of having a well submitted team that wants to serve well and to meet the needs of the lead pastor and the local church, and to do whatever it takes to make great things happen. And so I do. I have that skill set. And um my wife and I joke, we're like, wouldn't it be great if we can find someone that was exactly like us to come on staff and minister alongside us? I'm like, I don't know. I know me, and I don't know if I can handle me sometimes. But it's an important thing, you know. So I take those expectations and I give them to my team here, because they're my expectations for myself, and that's really what it is. It's, I'm taking my expectations for myself, taking them to my team, and saying, this is what I need. This is, I'm doing my best to communicate to you what I need done, and the needs of this local church, and the needs I have for myself, so that I can be prepared to minister in excellence to this church body as the lead shepherd. And and that's an important thing here, and it does have a big play in that, uh, because again, it's that discipling, and if I can pass on those principles that I have gathered over the years with these different churches, and then help instruct and coach and guide others, who are early stages of their ministry experience, and give them the same things that I have learned as I've ministered unto the Lord and ministered to pastors and to church members, and give them that skill set, that willingness to be that servant, that willingness to love people and to love the lead pastor and to come alongside and to meet their needs, um, then I know it can make a huge difference. And I say that because I've been on that journey, and I've seen it. I've seen it where it excels well. But that whole idea of the armor bearer is huge, and it's one thing that I have learned to do in the workplace, but then also to learn how do I transfer that to the church and do it in my story. You know, one final thing as I wrap up is that even when it comes to the context of marriage, being an armor bearer unto your spouse is such a huge deal, especially when you see the Bible's definition of love and how sacrificial it is. That when we come alongside our significant other to love them, to serve them, to meet their needs, how far it goes in creating a health for the overall relationship. Whether it's the husband meeting the needs of the wife or the wife meeting the needs of the husband, it goes such a long way when we have that spirit of an armor bearer, and just this willingness to love and to serve and to come underneath and to meet those needs that they have, and that there's a beauty in that, and that's what we are called to operate in, and that's the love that the church and the people of God should operate in, as we are armor bearers, as we become armor bearers and battle buddies one to another, spouses to each other, staff ministers and teams and church teams to the lead pastors, and vice versa, that we come alongside and we undergird one another, that it creates this amazing relationship. And it goes into the same with other businesses. When you decide to become an armor bearer to your employer, to your area of work, what things can transpire as we learn to live in excellence, as we learn to serve and come alongside and to meet the needs of those around us, how big it is, as what it does for the overall health of relationships, and how amazing that is. I hope that you've enjoyed this finale on our Battle Buddy series. I hope that it was really encouraging for you. If you missed any part of this series, there all 16 episodes are on the church app and on the church's YouTube account. And so we would love to have you join and watch these all over again. Thank you so much for being a part of the discussion. We have our in-person gatherings. We have our Sunday morning. We gather at 9 a.m. for Sunday school, 10 a.m. for Sunday morning worship, with prayer at 6 p.m. on Sundays. And it is a wonderful experience. We live stream our Sunday morning messages. And so if you're unable to be here in person or you live out of the area, catch us online, YouTube at around 10 o'clock for our live stream. And we appreciate that so much that you join us that way. Our midweek is on Wednesday nights. We meet in person. And for the summer, we are meeting in person at 6:30 during the summer. And it is a wonderful time to gather and just have fun with every age group available. We also have our online class that meets every Thursday morning at 7 a.m. And so we are so thankful that you join us online. This concludes our Battle Buddy series. We're going to take a few weeks off just to refresh and prepare. And then when we come back in the summer, we will have another great online program for an online series during the summer for you to jump in on. And we hope that you enjoy that upcoming series, which will be announced later on, and you will see that opening video in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are enjoying the ministry of the local church and you would like to contribute towards it, there is a giving link in the description below, and that just helps supports the church and our online means and the ministries that we do here in southern Minnesota. As well, if you're in the church app, there's the giving icon in the church app. Thank you so much for being a part of our discussion. We are thankful that you enjoyed this whole series, and we look forward to worshiping with you soon. Again, blessings to you, and we'll see you next time. Farewell.